Let's do some Jarell Quansah to begin with, I think. You've been across this. I've seen a couple of articles you put out already this morning. It ties in really with a couple of different strands of story, I think it's fair to say. But it does appear somewhat, Paul, that Jarell Quansah could well be on his way out.
Yeah, Liverpool are in advanced talks now with Leverkusen over the deal. I think possibly somewhere between 35 and 40 million will be the eventual figure. A little bit surprised, I have to say. I know there's been murmurings about it for a few weeks, but I was surprised that Liverpool would be willing to let a young defender with huge potential go out the door without having a ready-made replacement to come in. So, yeah, personal opinion is it could be a mistake, but I think the people in these positions have earned the trust to say that they know what they're doing. Arne Slot comes in, wins the Premier League by barely scratching the surface of the squad, adding just Federico Chiesa to it and then barely featuring, and Richard Hughes, the work that he's done in over the last year and certainly over the last few weeks in terms of bringing in Frimpong, Wirtz and Kerkez will get done as well. So, I'm a little bit surprised, but like I say, I think these people have earned the trust to think that they certainly know what they're doing. So, yeah, let's see what happens. It was put to me yesterday that a young centre-back is now the priority, and I think that has been on the agenda for a number of years now. They were looking at Levi Colwill a couple of years back with the acceptance that it might be difficult to get him out of Chelsea on the back of a good loan spell at Brighton, who also wanted him around that time. Lenny Yoro, Real Madrid and Manchester United wanted him. He's obviously gone to United because he was guaranteed more playing time and probably a bigger wage. And Dean Huijsen as well. Real Madrid pay that release clause and get him in. So Liverpool clearly looking at a certain level of young defender. You look at the clubs who those targets are playing for now, and it's Chelsea and Manchester United. Okay, albeit didn't have a great season, but huge clubs in England and Real Madrid who, many would argue were the biggest in the world for Huijsen. So they are looking at a certain profile, certain age, and that continues this summer. But it was put to me yesterday that they are relatively relaxed and they are willing to bide the time for the right player and won't just sort of, spend good money after bad just for the sake of bringing in another centre-back to replace Quansah, who only started one game last season before the title was won, and that was in the opening weekend, and it only lasted 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and I'm with you actually in terms of being somewhat surprised that we've allowed Jarell Quansah to go, especially, and you said it right at the end there, especially without having that replacement lined up. It's been obvious for some time now, it's been apparent for some time, Liverpool are keen to bolster the centre-back department with a young option. But you'd imagine Liverpool's search for that player would go up a notch, given the Quansah looks to be out the door. But the fact that we don't have somebody immediately to turn to and go, well, he's the guy, and that's somewhat surprising as well, would you say? Yeah,
a little bit. Obviously, Marc Guehi is there, isn't he? And he's seen as a bit of an outlier in terms of that young defender search, because he's 24. He'll be 25 in about 2 or 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And he's in the last year of his contract, so if a cut price deal could be struck for someone who's ready-made to come in and play straight away, then I think that would appeal to Liverpool, but it depends how much Crystal Palace are looking for him. They turned down 4 bids for him from Newcastle last summer, which were around about 60 million, weren't they? So clearly they're not going to want to lose him too easily. They are looking to bring in Ousmane Diomande from Sporting, whether he's a like-for-like replacement or to someone to sort of go in alongside him. We're not sure at the moment, but yeah, I don't think Guehi is going to be the sort of immediate successor for Quansah. I think if talks do step up over him, I think this idea of bringing in a young centre-back will still sort of prevail, and it's just a case of who that might be. I personally got my own preferences. I'd love to see Jarrad Branthwaite come in. Okay. But
no controversy there
whatsoever. No.
Nice and straightforward, Paul.
It's almost impossible to get anyone at Liverpool to sort of talk up the merits of one of Everton's star players for obvious reasons, but I think that would be the ideal one if he wasn't playing for the local rivals.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, on the centre-back department, we'll stick on it for a moment or two, because obviously I think a lot of people would have gone into this summer looking at our options and going, we probably need to add one anyway. Now all of a sudden we're facing the world of Jarell Quansah, whilst, as you mentioned, he had his breakout season and then he didn't really get much of a season at all last year. And every time he did step onto the pitch, I felt quite sorry for him in a way.
Just bad luck, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it felt like his mistakes were amplified by the fact that he just resulted in goals all the time. Yeah. Like, you can make a mistake and get away with it and you just sort of wipe your brow and go, that was close. That wasn't happening with Jarell Quansah, who's ended up in the back of the net every time. But there's question marks and there's interest seemingly around Joe Gomez, who ironically, it's 10 years to the day since he joined the football club. But I don't think anybody's certain that he'll still be a Liverpool player come the end of the summer. So therefore, it begs the question, like, this is somewhat of a revamp all of a sudden. Like, there's question marks about Konate's longer term future still, of course. Having seemingly been out the door potentially 2-3 months ago, Virgil van Dijk is suddenly the only certain one amongst them.
Yeah, 34-year-old Van Dijk staying on for another, well, it's going to be 34 in a few weeks, staying on for another 2 years. Yeah, I mean, if you want some sort of surety from the back line, it's probably knowing that Van Dijk is going to be there. Konate, I still expect, I don't think he'll leave this summer. I think Liverpool will look to take a little bit of Van Dijk-Salah chance on tying him down during the season. He seems very happy and settled on Liverpool. At Liverpool, he was speaking after the Palace game last month to us, which was his 25th or 26th birthday, and he was saying that talks had stepped up the previous week with his representatives and the club, and he seemed quite positive over the developments there. So, let's wait and see what happens with that one. I just can't see him being sold now. I can see the wisdom in avoiding a Trent situation in terms of thinking, well, if you're thinking he's not going to sign, you're going to have to look for a buyer for him. But it doesn't seem as though Liverpool don't think that they can get him tied down, if that makes sense. So I think he will stay. And then you've got Wataru Endo, who can play as a centre-back. I think we'll probably see him play more there next season than in midfield, if we're being honest. Gomez is an interesting one, hasn't played in the Premier League since December. 10 years at the club. Talk of Newcastle last summer wasn't a mighty feel like. He's finally set for a change of scenery. We're not too sure. But there's a lot of spinning plates and a fair few question marks over that centre-back department at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks.
It is, yeah. It feels like, again, we obviously, we brought in 3 on the cusp of brilliant footballers, and it kind of strengthens the squad. And all of a sudden, they say you're in a world where you could lose one of the young centre-backs, having really need to bring one in anyway. It feels like more business is definitely to come, both in and out the football club.